We couldn't use them. I mean, I'm not sure I understand
I
that.
said, you try to build this and anybody over here is gonna stop the project.
Who's the architect on it?
Firm out of, East Coast,
One of my favorite projects.
he's the one that Jack Nicholas uses all the time.
Oh,
I like
Kyle,
Mr. Banks.
can't even believe I forgot their
Oh,
name.
that's because I'm wearing pink. It'll change.
Big firm here.
how much would it have taken them to redo the drawings to class impacts? Not that much,
Couldn't,
right?
they couldn't do it. The spacing
Oh,
would have never
sizing.
been, had to be
Oh.
totally redone.
Okay, so they
And that
took
was
a
my
bit.
point. They went out and they staked out the building. Of course, I was on the board and on the HOA, and I said, guys, I can read the King's English. You got a 50-foot setback. You got about 12.
I didn't,
No
but I do
way.
now.
And then
Now she knows.
the club went and spent the money to
It's okay.
attorney
I think
to go out
I
and
was
see
supposed to relay
what
that
the
information.
way of getting an exception was. And you had to get an exception from everybody signed off within 200 feet.
We got 1 minute.
There's no way in the world people are gonna agree to
No,
that.
no. Yes, sir.
Thank you for your invitation, but I have a conflict.
Understood. We have a rabid Ohio State fan, so it's okay, I'll tell her.
Are there any that you can find?
Yes, they're late,
I thought they all went
I was gonna
underground.
say they went
They all
under.
went underground. Is that now a ordeal, or is that couples, or is that?
couples, yes. In fact,
We
and
got
this is
1
one of our
minute. Are
attorneys
we
at the
ready to
FASD
start recording?
meeting, she's gonna talk about
Here's.
I'm sorry?
it. Attorneys at the meeting at FASD.
Okay, I've got 3 o'clock, so I'm gonna call the meeting to order. The first thing that I'll say is if you have a phone, please turn it to silent for the duration of the meeting, and if you wish to speak, you need to sign up. There's sheets at the back to fill out and give them to April. April, raise your hand. Thank you. And the first thing we'll do is Pledge of the Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hey, Jason, you have a recorder?
I'm recording right here.
Thank you, Mr. Guy, I'll have an extra hors d'oeuvre on you.
Okay, do we have anybody that signed up to speak?
We do. Flavio Walsh, regarding Magnolia Lakes.
Hi everyone. It's Flavio Ocean. I'm the HOE president of Magnolia Lakes, Florida. I'm coming to this board to actually ask for a few things. This is probably my 4th or 5th time the last couple years that I have come to the board to request that the board takes a look into our pond. There are many issues with our pond: water quality, washouts, erosion, lack of littorals, and many requests have been made to the board to take a look at it. Just to make it really short, our pond had nothing, I feel, but estimates and quotes and tests done. But action, we only had one. Last year was the only time that a proposal went out, and I got an email from L with the addresses and the information of the washouts that were to be repaired. Only half of that was repair, and to be quite honest, it's only a year and it was done very poorly. I walk the pond at least twice a month. I was there yesterday. The pipes that were left, they weren't anchored properly. They are broken. They are, faded from the sun, so they're really easily cracked. The drains that were placed, they were too small, so they're clogged. Many different issues. From April 2015, we had 24 major areas on that pond that needed either washout repairs or erosion. I just did another walk with Al on December 22nd, and at this time we have 42 points that need repair and washout, so it pretty much double. And those repairs that were listed on the new report, I don't know if the board had a chance to see it or not, includes the previous ones that were done. So to my point, they were either not done correctly or, I can't really speak to that. So that's one thing. I know a proposal it was given to the CDD, and what I'm really asking is to the board, take a look at it and just really pull the trigger. We need to make it happen, you know. It's leading to a lot of other issues. I have 3 fountains that were replaced twice this year. I was just there with Aquagenics and L, and the reason why my fountains are blowing up, it's, you know, 2 of them was because of algae. There's so many, you know, so much algae. My other fountain that was off since July 2nd was turned on December 23rd and was clogged a week later, and it's turned on, it's off. So that's my other issue. I know that the board has approved additional aerators for my pond, and they were installed. It is at help, but
It has or has not?
it has. I do think it has helped, but I became concerned when I started receiving FP&L bills for electricity for my fountain since July to now, since none of my fountains were on. And to my understanding, the aerators that are located on my pond, the original ones that were installed plus the new ones, are on my meter. So I had spoken with April, and she had given me a choice to go back the 10 years that the original aerators were there and do a reimbursement for what the HOA has paid, or to forgive that, and from now on have the CDD pick up the aerators, including the fountains. So I spoke with my board, and we made a decision that we will be willing to forgive the last 10 years, but from now on have the board completely maintain the fountains, pay for the electricity and the aerators. Well, after I agreed to that, April came to me and said, well, now she needed the board's permission to go ahead and do such a thing. She wanted to know the average of how much the fountains were going to cost, because she has a base of what the aerators cost, because the district has them in different places. So she did compare the fountains that I have on my pond, actually the only one that I have now, to the one that's located near the Gateway Charter School. And the bill for that one, it runs around $300 a month. Well, that is not the same fountain I have. That is a significantly bigger fountain. The fountain that I have uses about 12 amps, and it runs about $80 a month. I reschedule FP&L to come in next week so they can actually give an exact amount of how much it's costing for that fountain to run, so you guys can have an idea. But at this point, I am going to request the reimbursement for the aerators, the electricity that was used for Lake 83 since 2006. And I'm going to request that the CDD takes over not only the maintenance as you guys have, but the electricity for those aerators. I do know that there is no meter, so if a new meter has to be installed, unless the CDD is willing to take the 2 fountains. Right now, there's only one working, but we're in the process of repairing a second one. The third one will not be replaced because we just do not have the funds to replace those fountains. So we're going to get one repair, keep the one that is there, and you know, the only other way to not have a separate meter would be just to pay for those fountains. So those are the 2 items. My last item, I'm requesting the littorals to be planted on my pond. I have provided the board about a year ago with the development order, which gives exactly what I need for that pond. No littorals have been planted because of the water quality, which I do understand that. But at the same token, I know how important it is to have the littorals there, because they do help with water quality, because that was the argument of last meeting. We are completely out of compliance. And to that note, the reason why we have no littorals at that pond, it is because the severe amount of treatments that were done to that lake with copper that kill all our littorals. Between the periods of, I believe, 2014 to 2015, there were about 25 treatments to that pond, which is an extreme large amount of treatments. So that completely killed all the littorals we had. Open to any questions?
Chairman.
April, I think this would be the kind of thing, as far as the fountains and the electricity and the reimbursement, that really needs to come back as an agenda item so that we have all the information so we can make an informed decision on that.
Yeah, do you want me to comment on this issue now, or will you just comment now as far as what we know?
I've got a couple of questions too. Which came first, the fountains or the aeration?
Which was
Was the aeration provided by Lennar?
Beezer.
Originally?
Beezer.
Or, I'm sorry, Beezer.
Beezer.
They were-
Everything came.
So the fountains were added
They,
secondary, or
we-
they came together?
They came together. Originally, we had 2 fountains.
So then
and 3,
they
I
didn't,
believe.
provide, what they should have provided was 2-meter bases.
Yeah, well, if that's what they needed to be provided at that point, yes.
So I guess the question is, why can't we, because all of it comes in from the south side
Mm-hmm.
and goes back, and it's all on the common meter, correct?
It
It would
is,
be
yeah. It's
very
between the
easy
two
to
homes.
separate the power right there at the street, put in a second meter, separate the fountain electrical from the aeration.
Aerators.
Why would
Meter.
you want to do that?
Because one's theirs, one's ours. It's two separate bills. Their power goes to, they pay for the power of the fountain, we pay for the power of the aerators. That's the difference. So it'd be easy to do. Now, how we handle the reimbursement, to me, I think what you just discussed of going back and doing a calculation seems to be the easiest way. Last thing we want to do is make a mountain out of a molehill on that. That's not that hard to calculate. The littorals I have a problem with, and I understand, we've talked 100 times on this. The DO calls for the littorals. Our problem is that we have this pond on our lake bank project, and we go in and put the littorals, the next thing we go is with the lake bank project, we're gonna tear the daylights out of them. Those two need to be combined together. In fact, they need to be combined together on every project, but we're already off and running the wrong way on that. But maybe when we start on 83, we do it the right way, that we go in, and at the time we put in the lake bank restoration, we do the littorals, especially with a pond that's got a DO requirement for littorals, and do it right and be done with it.
And I'm okay with that. I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at the last proposal that was done on the 22nd for the restoration for the washouts on that pond, and that's the one that lists the 42, I believe 42 different washouts. There are 2 areas in that whole entire map that do not need repair. Could we just have the littoral at those 2 spots for a start?
No, they do. This is previously.
Do you have,
They never have. They're always for
April,
it.
do you want
No, they've always been
to
for it.
comment on this?
They're very proactive.
So on the restoration issue, this pond is number 83. It is our problem child pond. It has been for some time, and I know Molly and Elle have been working, trying to come up with some resolutions for Pond 83. We did start to escalate the issues, and we were looking at some different options as far as just the water quality and trying to start addressing some of the erosion or the washout issues. This pond did not meet the prioritization on the engineer's report as far as the first round. So the erosion is not that bad, but they do have several washouts. The proposal we just received, I have not even viewed the PO, so this is something that Elle is working with Flavia directly. And so it's not like this has been pending for a long time. Elle has just now prepared the purchase order. It's probably in my basket. I haven't even had an opportunity to look at it. I went out and asked how much it is. It's $51,000 to fix these washouts. That is not in the budget. So this again boils back to the capital planning and how we're going to address some of these issues moving forward. What was your specific question again relative to how we can approach the repair?
Well, this kind of gets the cart before the horse. The issue is we've already set up a plan for all 60 ponds of how we're proceeding. We pull one out, you're gonna have a line at the door to doing the same thing. The whole issue gets back, and we've talked about this I don't know how many times. We're looking at a long-term plan, and the residents aren't going to be accepting a long-term plan. We need to get in and do this now. This stuff has been kicked down the road for 26 years. We need to accelerate the projects so as to bring in 83 and all the other ponds that aren't in the first 13 and get these things addressed.
But I think right now, what our approach should be is, from an overall plan, we could go back and reprioritize number 83 in the plan to see where we're at. Perhaps have it looked at again as far as fixing the banks in its totality instead of just repairing, a significant amount of washouts.
That original plan of the 13 ponds was not cast in stone, so there was nothing wrong with that at all.
And I need to add to this. It was at one point, due to the water quality, our pond was brought up to, it was probably, I think, either the last phase or the one to the last, it was brought up to the first. But, I mean, to add, and it's really, I mean, I have emails dating back from 2013 with the addresses and with saying, we are working, we're gonna repair those washout next week. They were never completed. So then, you know, to me, did the district pay for those and nobody follow up? I mean, I don't even know at this point. I mean, I literally read 493 emails the last 2 days, and it's quite upsetting because all we get is, let's do core sample, which we have done, parametrics, we have done sediments, we have done water tests. Is the pond that had most water tests in the entire gateway. So the data is there, it's available, we just need to make a decision. And as you guys can see, in 1 year, the amount has double and what needs to be done. So it's just gonna cost more if we continue to kick the can down the road. It's a fairly new lake, it's only 10 years old, and we started presenting issues in 2010. So,
I think this is something that you obviously need to do a little bit more research on. You've just gotten that. That's why I said I feel like this needs to come back as an agenda item so that we have.
Well, the
Data.
PO is $51,000, so it will definitely need board approval.
Yeah, and I don't think any of us are ready to make a decision on that without seeing, you know.
And nor is any action being requested at this time. So we will try to reprioritize Pond 83. We'll evaluate it, and we will research the purchase order, the proposal that's been done. Elle and I will discuss that, and potentially, you know, bring Chris into it and possibly the engineer, and we'll see if there's something, a portion of it that's worth fixing, or what we're gonna do as a whole.
But we have another issue on 83. 83 is at the head of the works. No water comes into that other than the rain that falls on the roofs and in the street. That's it. There's nothing upstream. We've been trying to talk to, and Danny may be able to answer, God, I thought I saw him come in. We're talking to Timber Creek, and one of the things that we'd like to do is see if there's any possibility that the water that's coming from Timber Creek, a portion of that water could flow through 83 and help some of their problems. Their water, they just don't
Yeah,
have any
that's their
turnover.
water quality
That pond gets
issue.
no turnover whatsoever, and then the fact that it has a wetland, a dinky little wetland on the north side of it that has to maintain a certain elevation of the water, that water has to build up to where it's almost high tide before the first drop goes out of that pond. So it just sits there is all it does. We need a flow through, and Timber Creek could help that. So there's more than just the issue of what was talked about that creates that water quality.
Okay.
As for the aeration and the electric bill, that Flavia probably brought that to, it's probably mid-November, so it's been a while now. And Elle and I looked at it and she was tasked with providing some sort of summary, and we went back and looked at the bills because I was hoping that it was going to be more of a lateral switch and we could make it simple for the HOA and just swap one electric bill for the other. But it didn't turn out to be that simple. So what we're struggling with is narrowing down the cost of just the electric for the aerator. And so we started looking at the cost of the electric for other ponds that have just a single aerator on it. And we were way off on the dollars. And so that's where it kind of stops, like, okay, I'm gonna have to put some more time into this. So it's not that we haven't been addressing it, we have been addressing it. But we were we kind of ran into a hurdle that we haven't been able to overcome yet.
Well, the one thing we could do to avoid the problem continuing is get the new meter base in and get that done
Right.
immediately. Just have FPL come in, set a meter base, switch the electrical off for our aerators versus their fountain, and have the two separated, and going forward, then we don't have that issue. That's
Okay.
not that hard to do.
All right, I'll get a proposal for that.
All right. Is anybody else signed up to speak?
Yes, we have Neil Montgomery, but she's requesting.
Dave's gonna go first and then I'll go.
Okay, she was requesting to speak at the time of the item.
Okay.
Correct.
Must be serious, Dave, sitting in the front.
And then,
Raring to go.
then we do have David Caldwell from WCI on
that-
6A-I and 2I.
Okay. Can that wait till we get to those items?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Then we have Matt Price wants to speak on a non-agenda item regarding a fence. I believe the attorney is aware of this issue.
Hello, Matt Price. I'll be quick. Looks like you guys have a lot of important stuff to talk about. I own a couple houses in Gateway, also a bunch of property in the front, West Links and part owner in East Links Business Park. I have a house in Little Gem Circle, which is in Magnolia Lakes, built, let's see, 10 years ago. 7 years ago, we put a fence in. That fence was put around existing landscaping that Beazer put in. That landscaping apparently was in a gateway easement. So there's a 20-foot easement in the back. We've encroached on that easement. My family grew. We bought a house right across the street in one of David's communities in Hampton Park. Live right there. Still live in Gateway. Trying to sell this house. Obviously, I can sell this house with this in there, and the banks will probably approve it, but I'd really like to have the resident moving in know that they won't have their fence lopped off if it's possible. Chances are this fence has been there a long time, and even with the work that goes on, it's probably not going to encroach on any of the work that needs to be done, but that's your decision to make, not mine. So my attorney will be sending in some documentation on this, and hopefully you guys will give me a fair thought on this. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but I'd love to be able to at least get you guys to take a look at it. So.
What's the address of the property?
It is 13244 Little Gem Circle. I have the survey here. I'm sure you guys have a copy of
Is this
it.
Stoneybrook or Magnolia Lakes?
It's Magnolia Lakes.
So you're on the lake side.
I am.
So the lake easement's 20 feet.
20 feet.
How far are we talking encroached?
It's right here.
Couple 5 feet, 6 feet.
Well, if we go in and do these lake projects.
Sure.
We're gonna be tearing up everything that's within the 20 feet.
Are you? Okay.
So why would we, okay.
Well,
Why-
that may
Is there
be-
an alternative to take at that time when the fence will come down?
Well, the
Just
only
move it back 5 feet?
Sure. The only issue remains is there's 3 huge palm trees also in that easement that was installed by Beazer, and good luck trying to get those suckers out of there and putting them back in. I mean, the only reason that the fence went back that far was to get around the palm trees.
Are the palms inside the fence?
Yes.
Inside the LME?
So the fence goes. So palm trees are here. The fence hugs the palm trees.
There's the fence, there's the property line.
Maybe my attorney. I don't.
The instructions?
Yes, yeah, my attorney has the instructions. He's gonna be sending in the documentation, but he asked me to come here and talk to the board up front, so you guys know what.
So we've started the documentation process.
Yeah, so the only reason that the fence goes back that far is because there was no way for me to put a fence back there and not have it, so my landscaper said, well, we're not gonna go and prune the bushes and everything, because it's outside the fence, so we're not doing anything outside the fence, so.
I guess just for clarification, when you make your submittal, the fence is located about 12.2 feet.
Is it
up
12.2?
From the edge of the,
Oh,
lake
okay,
track.
I see it right here, you're right.
And, you know,
8
Are the
feet.
palm trees between the fence and the house?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
So the reason that the fence is there is to encompass the palm trees. So it's the 3 palm trees, then they're big palm trees now. They've
So
been-
they're in 8.5 feet of.
So they're 8.5 feet into the LME.
And the fence hugs those palm trees. So if you're gonna have to cut the fence out, the palm trees have to come out too. And I don't know how that's looked at, because that was purchases. So look, I'm just trying to make it easy for the next guy coming in. It's a nice house, nice yard for kids.
We'll wait to get your.
Yeah,
documentation.
understood, but I just wanted to bring it to your attention and know that I'm a Gateway resident. This wasn't done as this was just trying to get around.
You're not the only one.
Okay,
And ju-
thanks.
and I guess, and if I may, Madam Chairman, I think you provided all the sort of the forms of documents we've used before. You've given them to Mr. Cook.
I have given him Mr. Cook. Mr. Cook will be, he's my attorney. He's.
Have
he knows-
David give me a call. I'll
Yeah,
talk to David before.
I'll have it, and he'll send it in. And again, I know that, I have to get the attorney involved, but I just wanted to come here and tell you guys what I was doing, so this isn't just out of the blue. And I'm not some guy trying to flip a house. This is, I lived in it for 8 years, and now we moved right across the street, so. All right?
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
You need palm trees in your new house across?
I got plenty of them. David's company does a very nice job with that. So.
Tell me they're not in the LME.
I was smart. I didn't build on a lake this time. I got a nice little end lot with no lakes. Done with lakes. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Was there anyone else? Okay. All right, we'll move move on to 3A, that's P-PAC report.
Yeah, I saw the survey. No, it was an email. It was an email.
Phil Measy, 9296 Trias Drive, representing P-PAC. You have a written P-PAC report in the book, I believe. I'll just comment on a couple of things on it. Most of it's pretty self-explanatory. One of the things that's mentioned is we're going to be getting a letter out to all of our people in Pelican Preserve about this Dwelling Live system, and that letter will be going out on the 16th of January. We will be changing over from the old system to the Dwelling Live system, and we think this will facilitate traffic through the gate. And we have other things that we can probably do once that system is in place that will further help how we get our traffic through the gate. So we think it's a pretty important thing for us to be doing this. It just makes a lot of sense. It's not costing us any significant extra money to run this new system. It's being provided by Securitas and so we think that's okay. The other thing I would comment on is, if you read it, you will see that I made an obvious error in saying that our facilities, CDD system and facilities operation agreement was sent from, it actually was sent from District Council to the people at WCI. WCI has effectively approved it. It looks like we are finally, and this has taken a year and a half, finally ready to put a new O&M agreement in place. And we hope that it looks like we will be able to review it at our PPAC meeting next week and present it to you the following week or one of your following meetings. This agreement, by the way, for those of you who are not familiar with it, is really the thing that governs the complete relationship between the CDD and WCI, that is providing a lot of services, financial services, and other services for us in Pelican Preserve. The only other thing I would mention is that we are still trying to get our traffic study underway. We seem to be having a problem getting a proposal from Johnson Engineering, who's going to do the study, but we are going to go forward with a traffic study as you requested us to do. So I can answer any questions you may have.
Phil, I've got one.
Yeah.
You guys are leading the way once again. I see under capital reserve study.
Yes.
You guys are proceeding with a capital reserve study that is analyzing the assets owned by the CDD.
That's correct.
I guess the question to the fellow board members, why aren't we?
We, by the way, have done this previously. We had a previous capital reserve study, but it needs to be updated.
So you've got something that differentiates the assets that are in Pelican Preserve that are CD owned, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So you've allocated water lines, sewer lines, reuse lines, all of that, roads, whatever.
Yeah.
Over and have a separate independent listing of those on which you're doing
That's right. And one of the things we're working on, and we mentioned that we're trying to get an update from the Severn Trent Finance, is to be sure that we really have an accurate list. We're concerned that
Well, that's what I was going to ask you next. Where did you get the identification of the quantities and the age they were put in? Because I've been asking for that here for years.
And that's what we're trying to get, because we think that our previous study probably didn't accurately reflect that.
I certainly don't want to suggest to doing something that's going to hold Pelican Preserve back.
Yeah.
But we certainly need to be doing that same thing here in the CDD. And I don't know why. You obviously see a reason for doing it. Our HOA saw a reason for doing it. I think there's a very important reason for doing it. Why aren't we doing it?
Yeah. Well, we of course are doing it because we want to know how much to put into our reserve every year for replacement.
Have you gone out for a request for proposals for firms to do the work?
No,
Or have you
not as
selected
yet.
somebody?
We're still trying to get the information to be sure we have accurate information to give the firms to do the work.
To give to the firms.
To give to the firms to do the work.
So you're in the preparation
We are in the
phase.
preparation phase. Now, we have been coming to the board each year and recommended funding for our reserve, but that's based on the old study, which we think is probably not terribly accurate. And so But we have, over the last 3 or 4 years, we have come to the board, and we do have a reserve. We have started to build a reserve, but we haven't done it very accurately, I'm afraid.
How are you addressing the amenities that are not owned by the CDD? Are you doing those concurrently?
No.
So how are you addressing those?
Well, when you say.
Well, for example, if you've got and the answer may be that it's still
Yeah.
under WCI.
Yeah.
Your whole town center.
Yes, well, that's a WCI.
So it's not yours to worry about
That's not
yet.
ours to worry about. It's a WCI-owned facility,
Okay.
as is the golf club, so we're really not worrying
So
about
so
that.
these are
We're
the
trying to
things that
just
are at
look
hand right now.
We're trying to look at the
We need to do the
CDD
same thing.
infrastructure items.
We need to do the same thing.
Any other questions for Phil? Thank you, Phil.
Okay. Should I remain up here? I noticed the next thing on the agenda is the minutes from our November 10th, or November 8th meeting, I guess it was.
Anybody had-
Really,
Really, the things you addressed were from the minutes, weren't they?
Yes, they really were, basically. I don't think there's anything special there.
One question, again,
Yeah.
back to what Flavio was talking about, and you guys have run the gauntlet on this. Based on your experience, and you guys have got, you're big into the littorals.
Right.
And you're also big into the aeration, and you're also big into the lake bank restoration.
That's correct.
Which goes first?
Which goes
Based
first?
on your experience, which would you do first?
I think Bob Geppert could probably answer the question a lot better than I could, Ed. I am not that close to it, but it seems to me that we would probably do the lake bank restoration
what I thought
first.
too.
Yeah. And, that makes sense. And we are also, of course, now, and this was mentioned in here because you provided some funds to do it, we are doing a pilot program. We have a program for roof drainage into the ponds. And that's going to be a biggie for us. Currently, and Tony and I have discussed this briefly, we think we can, even though some of this involves private property, we think that the documents for at least the community we're looking at now, which is Tiberio, will allow us to go in there and with the approval of the board, do this work.
So what, are you going to get a temporary easement from
Yeah.
the property
Yes.
Well,
owners?
we ran sort of the same issue with Gateway Greens, but the documents for Pelican Reserve and for Tiberio, in my initial review, appear to have greater latitude and greater retention of authority for the granting of easements or licenses for that.
For that.
And I think the Tiberio group met yesterday or today to give the approval. And I have one more set of documents to review, and I'll be getting back with Bob Geppert next week on that, as well as Mr. Measy.
Yeah.
So
So-
I'm pretty comfortable. Like I said, the documents are much different than the Gateway Greens
Yeah,
documents.
and so that will make it a heck of a lot easier for us than it will for you in Gateway Greens.
Thank you, Phil.
Okay?
Next is Stoneybrook.
Good afternoon, it's Joe McCulca from Stoneybrook at Gateway. I chair the advisory committee for Gateway and Stoneybrook. And I believe we're talking about the November 9th meeting, is that correct?
November 9th and December 7th are both on here.
Oh, December 7th is on there too. Like I said, I don't get that, I know. So I don't know which months you're looking at. In any case, there were some discussions on tree trimming in that month, and it has been taken care of. We're still waiting to handle the painting of the crosswalks, and hopefully that'll be done in a not-too-distant future. There has been discussion of a Stoneybrook flagpole inside the community, but on Gateway property. And the estimates are coming in a little on the high side for what was proposed, so at this point in time, that can's been kicked down the road. There was also some discussion, we've been looking at putting in new light poles, which we did do for along the Gateway, along Pebblebrook, I'm sorry, and moving 6 poles that were put in the middle of plantings that no longer cast any light because there's trees around them. And we wanted to move them, but the cost that we're getting from FPL as well as cooperation has not been good. And the cost may be excessive, more than we want to spend right now. And that's about it for the November 9th meeting, if you have any questions on that. I don't have the December meeting in front of me. If you have any issues on that, I'd be more than happy. I probably can do it from memory.
Mr. McCullough, it says here, April White suggested making a decision today contingent on checking budget with Stephen Bloom and getting a priority list regarding the phasing process. There isn't anything else in here about that. I guess it was for the heads, for the,
That is correct. We've had a problem. Now, there was a major irrigation problem for all of Gateway. And being at the end of the line, we tend to get it the worst because everybody else is draining the water out before it was getting to us. There was a proposal that came out of the blue. She had notified me ahead of time, but we didn't know anything about it coming beforehand. And it was for $21,000 to replace the heads on irrigation along Pebblebrook. Before I felt comfortable approving that and trying to look into the budget, I felt I owed the HOA board a look at that and to discuss it. And there were questions from several board members as well as other residents about different ways to do it and whether or not we, at this point in time, even wanted to move the irrigation around to better disperse the water and have less water running across the sidewalks, which has been a problem in the past. I have subsequently talked to the gentleman from, I think it's Zane is his name, from Mainscapes, and proposed a couple of those questions to him about moving things around and some of the other options. And he was going to, said he'd come back to with a proposal, multiple proposals on the various options. And he would bring it to our HOA board the next meeting this month. So we'll probably have a better idea what he's talking about and what those options are. But I got to tell you, when I brought a $21,000 bill back to the board, I didn't get a lot of, let's do it. Especially for something that wasn't budgeted for.
This is just to change heads?
Yeah, I know.
How about changing the timing on the controllers?
Well, the controllers, we're going to change a couple of controllers too that are not working properly, and I have mentioned to April to go ahead and do that, and I even talked to Chris about that, and we should be doing that shortly. He did order a couple of controllers, we're putting them in. There were problems there too. But with the problem, part of the problem is the nature of these heads. They're always going off. We do a great job of watering the street sometimes because they seem to always go off. And they also disperse the water in such a way on windy days, it's blowing all over the place and we're probably getting a lot of evaporation. Not efficient use. But with that said, I don't know if I'm ready to spend $21,000 yet either.
Can we ask questions?
Sure.
Not associated with this necessarily, but it is Stoneybrook.
Yeah.
We had a mess up at Stoneybrook over the weekend. We have, as I understand it, and this is for maybe getting out the Stoneybrook, getting it out to all, do you have a blast email that you can hit the residents?
Yes, we do.
All these pump stations have an audio-visual alarm.
Mm-hmm.
For the life of me, I do not understand how alarm can go off that long and allow sewage to pop manhole covers and go into the lakes.
It
I
must.
would think somebody would be screaming because those buzzers are about as offensive as you can get. And they went 3 days of listening to the buzzer run?
No, it didn't go 3 days. No, it went off the night before. The buzzer
So
went off
just
the night
over-
before.
Nobody
And-
called?
And believe it or not, you know, it's like when you lose power and you think, should I call, or has that everybody else already called in to say, I've lost power? And you don't want to be waiting online to tell them something you already knew. And I think that's some of what was going on there. And there was one woman who lives across the street who said, boy, did you hear that buzzer going off last night? And she knew what it was. And rather than call the, I think, 561-1313,
Yeah.
you know, I can't explain it.
Because there's like a 2-foot, 3-foot ride in those wet wells that
Yeah.
once that alarm goes off, that gives you plenty of time to come in and correct that. To have that go up and have enough force to pop the manhole covers is like somebody's asleep at the switch.
I agree. I also thought that there was a broadcast that goes out on that warning. Is there
We don't have a
anything-
SCADA system yet.
No, that's a
We should have
proposed,
had
we
one
don't
about
have
10
it.
years ago,
Okay.
but we haven't got it yet.
So that would have solved that problem. But yes, I agree, someone should have called, but I believe it went off about 2, 3 in the morning.
You're lucky, because over in my neighborhood, they call my phone at any time of the day that the horn goes off.
Well, that sort of happened. A couple of people got called. I got a call the next morning. That's how I found out about it. But by then, you guys had already were aware of it and were out there. But I will say this, that we're not the only community, believe it or not, that dumps into that lift station. That's the #1 primary lift station. So everything comes down Pebblebrook through Stoneybrook and empties into that lift station. But the villages across the street also dump into that lift station.
Yeah.
And we've had comments from prior operator managers, and Scott was one of them, saying, boy, there's a lot of grease in that's clogging things up. And the lift stations before that one on the Stoneybrook at, our side, aren't that greasy. The only thing I can say is it's coming from across the street somehow, some why, I don't know why. But we have no way to communicate to them.
Well, they have a pump station over there that pumps into your pump station.
That's correct.
So it'd be real easy to just go monitor that pump station.
I think that needs to be done then. Because one of the requests, I've done it before when I was president, was send out an email blast, please don't put so much grease down the garbage disposal, try to dispose of it another way. And maybe we need to do that somehow over there across the street at the villages. So could be part of the problem, I don't know.
Well,
But this is the same lift station, had all the trouble with the odor and everything. There's a long history
It's
here
your
of
main
problems.
station.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's a retention period there that creates septicity.
yeah, exactly. Anything else?
What's that word?
Septicity.
Any other questions
You
for
go
Joe?
septic.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
It stinks.
It's not 7 cities?
Consent
It's not
agenda.
7 cities.
Anybody have anything they want to pull from the consent agenda?
No.
Okay,
Just a correction.
okay.
On page 4. It says 5-0 vote. It wasn't a 5-0 vote?
What page we on?
Page 4.
Page 4 of the minutes, it's 33 of the agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry. I know.
So I think you were opposed, is that
Right.
correct?
Mhm.
So at the bottom of that page, the motion needs to reflect that it was 4-1.
Well, it says that later on. It's that 5/0
Needs to be
on
correct.
page 4 just needs to be removed,
Right,
correct?
correct. Because there was a voice vote.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you.
All right, so
I'll make it a motion to approve the items
with the correction to the minutes?
with the corrections noted.
Okay,
I'll second it.
okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, old business, DMS legal.
Yes, ma'am. As a follow-up to a meeting I had early last year with the State Attorney's Office, I today submitted some additional information, supplemental materials. And if the State Attorney's Office decides that the time has expired or that there's not sufficient evidence to support any criminal prosecution, then we'll find that out. And then our law firm, we've offered and agreed to pursue civil action to recover any monies from DMS at no cost or expense to the district.
Okay. When do you think we might hear back?
Don't know.
Hard to say. Okay.
Hard to say.
Gotcha. All right, defibrillator.
Madam Chairman, if I may.
Sure.
After the last meeting where Mr. Banks said that he thought the vice chairman ought to take care of the old business,
Yes.
I took the liberty of putting these 3 items on the
Okay.
old business part of the agenda.
Appreciate that.
The defibrillator, for those of us, including myself, that are not technically astute, is an item that paramedics, EMS, and others can use in case of a what I'm going to call a physical accident, i.e. a heart attack or something on the part of a person. We had talked last year about purchasing one of those and having it here in the meeting room, especially after, I'm sad to say, one of our residents passed away in this very room. Our attorney spent some time on this, but I'm sorry to say, it looks like it just, like some other things, went down the proverbial drain without our making any kind of a final decision on what we want to do about it. Seeing as I'm the oldest person in the room, I'm in favor of it. Especially if other people are going to learn how to use it. But I respectfully request that we review and renew the work that the attorney, and sounds like April wants to have something to say about it too there. I see her hand waving.
Wasn't there a couple of other issues where we were talking about the park also and the
Soccer field.
the soccer field and the
Pool.
the pool?
Yeah,
So
well,
there's
we-
multiple.
We talked and talked and talked. and we
But
never did
nothing
anything.
happened, yeah, I agree.
April White, your business manager.
A year ago.
I assure you, it did not go down the proverbial drain. It was.
It did not, you said?
It did not. It was set as a priority from Scott when we transitioned, and we did have, I had a conference call with the American Heart Association, and because I knew that my professional opinion and thought process probably would not match that of the board, I apologize, but I've been putting it off, bringing it back, because it is a passion issue, and there's a lot of good things about AEDs. My history is at a fire department, and so we were very, proactive with the AEDs, and that is an organization that actually understood the liability and the responsibility that goes along with that program. So when I had a conference call with the American Heart Association on April 15th, 2016, that's how long it's been sitting on my desk, we went over, what's that?
15?
16,
60.
yes,
She
16.
wasn't here at 50.
That's right.
So we did go over some important issues to consider, and after that, my initial thought is that the district isn't ready for this type of liability that goes with this type of program. There are Florida statutes and federal regulations that regulate such a program. There's a huge responsibility in the maintenance of the AEDs. You have to have a written established policy and program in place. You have to establish where you're going to put your AEDs. We do have multiple facilities, so we would have to manage, what facilities we're going to include them in, and manage the maintenance of those AEDs. There's regulations on whether or not they are available to just employees or whether they're going to be available to your public. And one of the priorities that was listed by a supervisor was for our 2020 planning for the district's reorganization process, is that we need to increase our accountability. And I think maybe a couple years down the road, once we establish that, because there's a huge amount of liability that goes with this type of program. Maintenance on these machines cannot be kicked down the road. It has to be a priority. There's issues as far as if we were to have one in this boardroom, we have people coming in here after hours that we're not available to monitor that. And I feel that our obligation would be to really check that AED on a very, very routine basis in order to monitor it appropriately. There's also the CPR and the AED training that has to absolutely stay current for that. So there's a huge responsibility that comes with it, although they are a great machine and it's a great thing to have and to offer your public. But it is not required by law. And so I feel that based on the conversation with the Heart Association, that we're just not there yet, ready to take on that financial exposure as far as the liability associated with that program. Sorry.
I got a question for the attorney, because she just scared the daylights out of me. The country club just put in 5 of these, and they're available for public use. We have them all around the golf course and in the various buildings. What I'm on the board over there, and nobody said a word about anything of what you just said. not a word of liability and other issues.
What about the Good Samaritan law?
I'm sorry.
That's what I was
No,
thinking of.
if going
That's where
back-
I was going to, is to
Going back
Tony.
in time, I was trying to retrieve the memos, blowing the dust off of this and pulling it out of the drain. From December of 2015 and January 5th of 2016. There are memos to the board on this topic because the question first came up at that point in time. And we did one separately for the Sherman Soccer Complex because it's used by Gateway Charter High School. And based upon a then recent Florida Supreme Court opinion as to what protections were afforded to entities under the Cardiac Arrest Survival Act, there's additional immunities provided if you have AEDs. We recommended under certain criteria that the district should consider Gateway Charter acquire and have operational all their facilities, AEDs. And then we also talked about the commons and other complexes, and April's correct that we also recommended if the district were to acquire AEDs, that there has to be detailed policies, detailed guidelines, work with the insurance carrier, follow the rules. If we want to attain the benefit of the statutory immunity scheme that's out there, it's a separate statutory immunity. Unfortunately, the legislature tried to broaden the immunity, and the unfortunate part is the Florida Supreme Court didn't quite see it the same way as the Florida legislature. And again, I think what I'd suggest is maybe come back in a more detailed memo too at the next board meeting with April's conversations, and then refresh these memorandums. And maybe if we have something from our insurance carrier, the board can decide which of any facilities the board wishes to have the.
Well, I guess the question where I was going, is there a differentiation between a public entity like us and a private entity?
Not under the.
There is in the OSHA rules.
I'm sorry?
There's a lot of OSHA regulations that go along with the program, and I think there's some exemptions for government in the OSHA regulations, but that's the only thing that the Heart Association made me aware of.
Yeah, no, the Cardiac Arrest Survival Act applies to association to provide some level of immunity and protection. I can send you a copy of these memos.
Yeah, I'm just concerned is that we did it over there purely to benefit the public and the members.
Well, if we have
And
somebody
there was
drop
no-
in this room, we'll haul them, put them in my car and take them over to the golf course. Is that what you're suggesting?
South restroom.
Bill, you'll have to settle for CPR
But-
for now.
Okay,
Well,
that's interesting.
Once
because
once again-
we weren't aware of any liability issues or maintenance issues or other issues of risk associated with this at all.
I'll send you these memos because you do have to have a routine, you have to have a policy of routine maintenance, like April said, the batteries, the equipment themselves, the training process, accessibility. There was one situation down in Naples where the community school of Naples, this is many, many years ago, had an AED, but it was locked in an office. And an individual playing basketball with his son had young guy, had a cardiac incident, and they couldn't go get it.
Well, ours
Okay, and then there was a situation in Fort Myers where there was one available, and that's the Florida Supreme Court opinion. Kid collapsed on the field, and nurses went there to take care of him, but nobody had used or attempted to use the device. And so you gotta be, there's a lot of positives, but there's also some downsides to it also. Once again, I'll recirculate the memos to the board.
Yeah, I'd like to read this.
Then if you want to have this, keep this on the old business and bring it up again next board meeting if possible. April, I don't know if you saw those memos. from
I
last
think
year.
at this point, we have other priorities that staff is really, really working on as far as time-sensitive stuff. I mean, if you want to distribute the memos, but I don't know what else I could tell the board as far as what the American Heart Association said.
can you mentioned them now at least twice, but you didn't tell us, to my recollection, exactly what the American Heart Association said.
What's their alternative?
The notes that I took from the conference call was that there were federal and state statutes that regulate these programs. The American Heart Association does not encourage the AED programs without a very high escalated amount of responsibility.
So you don't just buy one and put it in the corner? for
No,
instance.
no. The American Heart Association said that all program documentation has to be obtained and established before the equipment is purchased. There was also, we discussed the training, that there's CPR and required AED training. There's OSHA requirements for employer with 10-plus employers. There's also bloodborne pathogens and yearly OSHA requirement exposure plan, but also that I believe that governments could be exempt from those certain OSHA requirements. I got the price on them, $1,400 to $1,900.
But as an aside, while April's looking at her notes, the Florida statute does have requirements for training and certification. And again, it's all outlined in the memos with the attachments as to the
I'd like
Florida
to see
statutory
that.
scheme. Yeah, I'll send those to you.
as a board.
One more thing, Madam Chairman.
I'll send it to you.
I don't know the answer to this question. I always like to know the answer before I ask the question, but in this case, I don't. But if I went down to City Hall for a council meeting and someone dropped, would there likely be a unit there that could be used on a person? Or if I went to the Lady County Commission and someone had an attack, would there likely be one there?
I'm not sure if they are administering an AED program.
I don't know about the county commission, but I know that the city of Fort Myers had one at City Hall. And also you've got firemen and policemen at all the meetings, so you've got people there that are trained.
I think it's a risk issue is what it is.
Well,
It's a training, certification, maintenance issue.
just, one more comment. I spent a lot of time in governmental operations in another state, and it never ceased to amaze me how easy it was to not do something if there were too many regulations attached, even though it was a generally accepted positive item. I don't have anything more. So, yeah.
Madam Chair, can I get- How about the Red Cross? Did you contact the Red Cross? Because they also carry these. I know there are machines that actually talk to you and tell you step by step what to
Yes, they
do.
do.
So,
Yes.
I'm sorry, it's not the American Heart Association, it was the Red Cross that I was
Okay,
talking
that's
to.
what I was
Sorry.
wondering why
I'm
the
like,
heart-
wow, that sounds really familiar. Yes, it was the Red Cross that I was speaking
Okay.
to, I apologize.
Thank you. And like I said, there are machines that talk to you, that tell you step by step. And the Good Samaritan Act should fall into place too.
Right,
No,
right, but
once again,
the,
it's not the Good Samaritan Act. Florida has a special statutory scheme. You'll see it in the memos.
Okay,
We
thank
The-
you.
we have a certain level of governmental immunity different than the associations, but then there's a separate additional level of protection afforded by this act. And you'll see in the memo also that we recommend that they are required to be provided to Sherman Soccer Complex. And once again, we can have that discussion.
the emphasis of the conversation was the liability. That was the first thing that we covered. He talked about the regulations, that you don't have to have one, but if you have obligations, you have to maintain them, and there's civil suits if not maintained.
You contacted our carrier.
You're what?
You contacted
Our
our
insurance?
insurance carrier.
No, I didn't go past
We
talking
did,
to
when we
the
had,
Red Cross.
initially, we did the
Yeah,
memo we did and got some.
Yeah, I'd like to hear what they say.
Yes.
Okay.
If you'd recirculate those memos, Tony,
Yeah,
that would
I'm
be
trying to do
very
it now,
helpful.
but they're fighting back.
So, we can think about this.
Yeah,
We have to read them.
I'm not ready to write off just because the
Yeah.
medical
Yeah.
association says that.
I do.
Reimburse the district.
They'll tell you not to drink the water.
Yes, I was gonna bring that next.
Go ahead, you want to bring it?
If you put old business on there, I will turn it over to you.
Madam Chairman, members of the board, ladies and gentlemen, 4 or 5 months ago, it came to our attention that there is a building on Girl Scout Drive next to the Lutheran Church, appropriately called the Girl Scout Building, and it is or was for sale. And I think all of the board members who were sitting at that time went to the building and looked it over. I know that our engineers put together at least 3 memos with the pros and cons of acquiring that building versus
Expand.
putting together addition and expansion of this building. We had one board member, now conveniently no longer on the board, who was opposed to this. And nobody else wanted to particularly pursue the item in light of that negative comment. However, unless I'm mistaken, that building is still for sale. And I think at the very least, we ought to resurrect the last memos from our engineer that gave us the pros and cons of acquiring that versus going to work on expanding this building.
And also to circulate what it would be to expand this building, so it's kind of
Well, That
see
was in,
both
that was in the
options.
memo.
Yeah.
There was a cost and da-da-da-da
Yeah.
on both
Well, I think we need
sides of
to
the issue.
concurrently be trying to figure out what this organizational structure is going to look like, to know how it's going to fit. But I totally agree with that, but I'd even go one step further. Contacting the owner and finding out the possibility of a lease purchase to where we can buy time to think about this and not talking to a realtor. Go to the owner direct. Go to the owner direct and see if they'd be interested in a lease purchase. They're sitting on that thing and it's not going anywhere. A realtor will tell you anything.
I would think that we could surely really negotiate price on that quite easily.
I think you could too.
Because I don't know that many other people would probably be looking at that building for any kind of use.
I totally agree. I think it needs to be pursued.
Ken?
Okay, I have several questions on this issue. And I would like the pros and cons to be put up like in this kind of category.
So that's what the memo was
Okay.
like.
All right, I also would like 6 months of bills for electricity and water prior to unoccupying the building, of what their bills were. I also would like 1 year before occupying the building, any maintenance and repair of the building, and has there been any maintenance or repair of the building since it has been unoccupied? And I'm worried about the security down there. I have been down there several times, and it is not a very secure place. And I also would like to personally interview all the employees to see how they would feel about being separated in a separate building. Okay, I think I covered that.
Those are my questions. All right.
I would like answered. Thank you.
Will the chair then order a resurfacing of that final memo from our engineers?
Yes,
Thank you very much.
thank you. Those were important items. We needed to know what happened to them.
All right, that gives us staff reports. District council.
Under that, it's my understanding, before we dive into this, that item 6A, Roman numeral 2, is, will be continued to another board meeting. I think Ms. Brewer indicated that, WCI, because I guess the viewing has not yet been completed as to the drainage system of Tract L.
That's correct.
Is that correct? I just wanted to make
The
sure.
initial request when we met in December was to have the Gateway Roads project on this agenda for today.
Yeah, that was my mistake. I misunderstood. And that will be on the next board agenda.
Excellent.
Hopefully. I mean, I have my comments to be provided, and it can be included in the memorandum for the board to consider.
Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chairman, members of the board, and I think that's what Neil Montgomery and David Caldwell are here to talk on this topic. And and if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. And I think hopefully the memo was pretty self-explanatory and not too much material behind it. I have boxes and boxes, we make some recommendations at the end as to how we believe the board should proceed. Now, there's no easy answer to obtaining this access, and some routes may be less expensive than others. And so we have the two recommendations that are at page 91 of your agenda. That, again, we may have some difference of opinion from WCI in the form of the representatives. I've not had any conversations with them. But in our opinion, our recommendation is that we need to get permanent practical and usable legal ingress and egress. Over option 3 route is our one recommendation, and which is the route that goes east-west and north-south along I-75. And then there's different ways to do that. WCI perhaps could engage in with the others in a quiet title action, obtain title, to obtain the requisite title to that 50-foot strip. And then we can get the easements from all the necessary parties, Reflection Isles, Renaissance CDD, and WCI. And the alternative would be for the district to engage in the eminent domain action to attempt to acquire an easement over the questionable 50 feet and begin that process, hire an attorney that's knowledgeable and experienced in eminent domain, hire an appraiser, go through the whole entire step, process for that. And our opinion is, our recommendation is that should not be at the expense of the district. If you go back and look at the history of this property, going back to the minutes of 88, 89, my opinion is that the board was told they would get access at some point in time, even though there was a discussion about eminent domain. I think that was sort of the premise upon which they operated, and going ahead with the construction of the surface water management system. And I don't know what happened in '93 when we acquired those two little parcels, but those are our recommendations. And you may have some questions of Danny as to cost estimates for the route, the option 3 route, to improve it, to make it passable, whether or not there'd be a need to provide enhanced drainage or just bring it a little bit up to a little higher grade to make it passable as necessary. So I don't know if the board has any questions.
Mr. Caldwell, did you want to speak on this item?
Yeah.
Start.
Good afternoon. I'm Dave Caldwell, WCI Communities. Well, as we've sort of stated, a month ago, we were requested to be on this agenda, and we appreciate your accommodating getting this set for today. And certainly, I also think Tony did an incredible job pulling together 121 pages worth of information on this particular matter. But he didn't include all the information, and that was his choice of what he put in or whatever. But there are a couple of things I want to focus on are the big picture issues related to Area 9. It's not just an access easement issue that seems to be what was boiled down in the agenda package. Area 9, just for the board's edification, is this component right there. It's about 100 acres. The district owns 5 acres of it. We own about 95 acres. And it's been the case for decades, what I'm telling you on that. Area 9 is, in essence, the terminus, the downstream connection point for virtually your entire drainage system. Everything from Gateway, Stoneybrook, Pelican Reserve, Colonial Country Club over here, eventually drains this way and comes across the interstate and out to Area 9, and then through a marsh area over here, drains into 6 Mile Cypress. This is a critical component of the district's water management system. It always has been and will continue to be. It's important that you have control of it. It's always been part of the district boundaries. Coincidentally, from the very beginning of Gateway, you've been the permittee under the South Florida Water Management District for that area. It's not WCI, it's the district.
Operating permitting?
Construction permit. In the early years of Gateway, keep in mind the district came into existence in 1986. And during that period of time, Westinghouse, the developer, was working with the district staff to develop a water management plan for the entire community. And we started down in this area. And your initial bond issue was put out in 1989, Series 1989 water management bonds. You only, in order to put that bond package together, you basically only had enough money to deal with this area down here as to a bond issue, and that was known as your Area 1 bonds. I think they were finally totally paid off a few years ago in Area 1. But, as I said, this water management system for Gateway was designed to flow in this direction, eventually across the interstate and out to the 6 Mile Cypress. There was not money in the bond issue to construct infrastructure beyond Area 1 to get to the interstate. And we entered into an agreement with the district, meaning Westinghouse at the time in 1989, to fund the construction and give any construction that we did to the district in order to complete the system so that you would have a downstream flowway and an outfall, a positive outfall where it needed to be. We did that back in the late 80s, early 90s. It was over many years. We did it because, one, the district didn't have the money through the bond issue, and two, as was pointed out in the many agenda minutes that Tony found and put in your package, there was no access to these areas. This was all wilderness back in those days, and there was no access that came with this property. I'm not sure why, but that's just a fact. So we worked over many years with Worthington, we worked when Worthington Holdings acquired lands in this area that became Reflection Isles. We worked with them to acquire an easement. So in 2001, we finally got an easement for access to get to Area 9.
David, which one of those was that? 1, 2, or 3?
It was number 2, but preceded number 2. What ended up happening is Worthington Holdings sold the land to Lennar, which became Reflection Isles.
I believe it's at page 136 of your agenda packet, the graphic of that.
What did it connect into to physically get to that point? That was what, on the map there, as best you can
If I
show it.
recall right, this is a long time ago, there was public right-of-way down in this zone.
Yeah,
somewhere.
terminated.
I think this is Palomino or one
Yeah.
of those roads.
Yeah.
And that was public roads. Worthington acquired these lands that became Reflection Isles. And so
That's it.
Worthington, because there was no development plan, they gave us a more of a traversed way easement that got to our property.
Thank you. David, I believe
Okay.
that's it. Can you see it on there?
Yeah, that became the traversed way. There was a trail. If you went through the woods, that's the way you would go.
Did it traverse a wetland?
No, it was the way a rancher or a farmer would go through the woods.
Okay, so there was no wetland that...
Not defined wetlands. You gotta remember, this was wilderness. It wasn't ever,
Okay.
it wasn't permitted.
Okay.
Dave, I guess for clarification on that, David, my understanding though is that if you look at the revised temporary easement that was entered into a few years ago, the northern little curve of that is the remnant of this easement, which is
That-
now wetland under that.
We found out
conservation.
later that Worthington didn't attach all the legals to it. That's, if you want to know the nitty-gritty, there were certain errors in that easement. It got rectified in 2015 when Lennar was the developer of Reflection Isles. They found the old easement, which was meandering through the wilderness, crossed dozens and dozens of their single-family home sites that they wanted to build. So they clearly had a motive to clean that up and work with WCI, and I pulled the Gateway Services District into those meetings with Lennar so that the district had a seat at the table when that easement was negotiated.
But-
Tony was there, Scott Connell was there, I think someone with Severn Trent was there. But the point was, you guys had a seat at the table when the current easement of record, that is option 2, was negotiated and finally signed, sealed, and delivered.
How was that, I understand all that, reading it. How was the mitigation of that wetland that's disturbed by that handled?
It wasn't. But the easement existed before any conservation easement was ever created. It predated it. And there was a trail there.
This is a permanent easement or a temporary easement?
Well, that's what I want to comment
That
on.
makes a big difference in my mind.
In my opinion, it's temporary.
Well, there's,
Okay.
let me speak.
Okay.
The easement of record, the one done in 2015 that the district signed, WCI signed, and Reflection Isles and Lennar signed, is recorded. There are references in it, it's a multi-page document, as you've read, and there are references to it would be temporary, intended to be temporary, because everyone at that table hoped there was a better solution. It was sort of like the check second choice. But that was all Lennar could come up with at the time. So the references on temporary are in that easement. But from a legal perspective, and Tony, I trust, would concur with what I'm about to say, until someone comes up with alternative or replacement easement, that easement of record will be permanent forever and ever.
I disagree, so,
It doesn't go away, Tony, until someone changes it.
but it's intended to be temporary.
Is the,
It doesn't go away until someone changes it and records a different easement.
let's say we have agreement to disagree on that. I'm more worried about the dollars. Is there a mitigation necessary to use it?
Probably in the terms of real usability, you're probably correct. It's not a very usable function, but I do want to point out, it's sort of disingenuous on the part of district staff, 2 years after they were sitting at the table negotiating what the easement they were going to get, to now point out all the problems they have with it.
New parties at the table right now, please, but anyway.
I understand,
My
but-
concern is that from a construction point of view, I've seen it, been out there, walked it, to physically get a maintenance vehicle across from the road on Reflection Isle, back to the back lot line to do a 90-degree turn to go north, then to do a sweeping turn around the lake to go cattywampus across a wetland is just almost unimplementable.
I can't argue with you. You know, that was not what was finally offered by Lennar, what they were willing to give, and apparently in the negotiations, no one was able to come up with a better usable easement that, in fact, was recorded. So that's the recorded easement. Is it practical? I probably would agree with you that it's not practical, and it has many deficiencies as to how vehicles can get from the traveled roadways back into the wetland areas without more work. But again, as Tony points out numerous times, it was intended to be temporary. Option 3 was the preferred route. That's the one that goes by the interstate. That's approximately 6,000 feet in length. It's already a traveled way. It always has, well, it's been for eons a traveled way. The city of Fort Myers actually has their utility easement for massive utility lines that go across the interstate and eventually come through that area to serve, interconnect with their system. They have an easement. They were able to get it at a time frame when the one party that you've heard about, Mr. Freeman, who's BJ Holdings, has a small 250-foot strip of land that overlays that 6,000 feet along the interstate has been a holdout. Several things here that either help us or hinder us in getting a resolution here. Everyone, when BJ Holdings acquired that property from Worthington, there was an error in the way the document was put together and recorded. So it creates a cloud on what was, if you look purely at what was recorded, you come to one conclusion. If you talk to the people who put the document together and negotiated it, it isn't what was intended. A 50-foot strip was to be withheld. The 50-foot strip adjacent to the I-75 was not to be part of the land conveyance to BJ Holdings.
So in other words, there was a north-south 50-foot wide strip
Right.
across that isolated that cell tower area from the interstate.
Right. The attorney who negotiated that transaction, multiple attorneys involved in that transaction, with the exception of Mr. Freeman, have all said the intent was that 50-foot was not to be part of his property, and when the document was recorded, unfortunately, it doesn't reflect that. It sort of makes it look like he owns both.
So it's inclusive.
It makes it look that way. And any normal reading of it, that's what you'd say. So that's one. Two, we have tried over the years, as Lennar has, to try and get BJ Holdings, Mr. Friedman's, to agree to give us an easement, and he is totally unresponsive. It's almost to the point of, go away, I'm not interested. He doesn't counteroffer or anything else. He just has no interest. Three, in 2015, when Lennar was negotiating this amendment to the easement agreement that was ultimately signed and recorded, they also created a grant of easement on all the lands that they controlled of the 6,000 feet along for option 3, all the lands they controlled. They gave an easement. It's signed, it's sealed, and it's in escrow.
Is that just on that east-west leg at the south? Or
It's-
is it on any of the north-south leg?
Well, this is Reflection Isles.
Correct.
That's the entry to Reflection Isles.
Correct.
It goes, it's the complete,
So it's inclusive of the part that is Renaissance?
it's all of it.
It's all of it.
So,
So then we're missing this one guy.
and if we can get, and Tony is aware of this easement in escrow, he requested at the time that it not be recorded. It could have been recorded, but as soon as you record it, you make the other easement go away. The one that, you know,
So by definition, option 2 falls to the wayside.
yeah. As soon as option 3 easement is recorded, option 2 easement goes away.
But wouldn't that be in total? You'd have to have both components, both the BJ Holdings.
You need
component
BJ
and-
Holdings to make it complete.
That's what I was going to say. It's not just one piece.
Now, the way I read, again, this easement that's in escrow, it is actually because Lennar's belief is they own 100% of it.
Or Reflection Isles, Master.
The Reflection Isles owns 100% of it, and BJ Holdings owns nothing. The easement that's in escrow includes the BJ Holdings piece. Okay? Am I confusing you?
Oh, yes.
Sorry.
No, I understand what you're saying.
There are
There's a
certain
question
parties,
about the title.
there are certain parties that believe they own 100%, and there are other parties that question that BJ Holdings still has a chunk.
But we're in pretty much agreement, both you and us, that the issue right now.
It all
is
goes
BJ
away,
Holdings
it all
is
goes
the
away
issue.
with BJ Holdings.
That's what I thought. That's the way I read it.
And as to the concern, is it wet during the rainy season? You betcha. But you can get back there in four-wheel drive vehicles, because our people do it.
I do it once a month doing samples, and I can tell you from roughly June 15th through September 15th, I don't like going that way, and I'm in a four-wheel drive. It's
Right.
spooky.
Well, I understand, because no one likes to
You'll go
get,
down 2 feet deep.
well, no one likes to get stuck when there's water up to your floorboards. So, but it's
what I-
passable. It's not a mud pit.
Yeah, it's gonna take some major drainage pipes to go across there to transfer that
Well,
water to
that-
build the road, to
well-
be able to access it with the equipment that we're
And
talking
that's
about
where the
doing.
whole rub is. But the point is, so, in summary, the issue is, probably as Tony points out, is there adequate easement? But the big picture, keep in mind, the district is a permittee under the Area 9 permit. We've completed construction. It has been certified by South Florida. It is ready for operational phase and the transfer of the permit. WCI is done. We've done what we needed to do. It's no longer needing, it's now moved to the maintenance phase.
But the problem is, how do we maintain it if we can't get to it? That's the issue.
Well, we managed to get it up there for the last 3 decades.
I'll add a word, legally.
She wanted you to go first.
Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the board, I have read most of what Tony said, and I've listened to this. What have you been, talked about this at least twice, if not 3 times in front of this board. I'd like to ask the attorney, if this is not a perfect case for eminent domain.
It could be, we have to establish it's a public purpose. And I know, I understand, but there's a multi-part test for that. And there are, eminent domain, people that specialize in eminent domain that we've worked with in the past, that the board would decide to go that route.
But long story short, we can do it.
Yes. And once again, we need to consent to the city because it's outside, it's in the city boundaries, but I can't imagine that being any problem.
Could we ask David or anybody else that's representing WCI if they have any objection to our beginning to pursue eminent domain on this easement?
You don't actually need our consent to
Well,
do that.
I know I don't need your consent, but I don't want your opposition either.
We don't have any objection to that.
That's good.
You didn't add the phrase yet, that will bring up the opposition. Who's paying?
Just,
Well, I know.
Well,
hold on
can
just
we
for
go
a
back?
moment.
I mean, I think it's even, from WCI's perspective, it's more simple even than what David said. From WCI's perspective, they're done. They've done everything that they're supposed to. And if you look at Mr. Pierce's memo, he says in that first page that WCI is asking you to transfer the permit and asking you to be the permittee. We're not asking either of those things, and what I provided you last time we visited with you, and we'll provide you
Before you
with
go
another
on-
copy.
Sorry, before you go on, I had put off, Kathy wanted to ask a question, and I'd just like to go ahead and offer her the opportunity to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I agree with Supervisor Tinkle. I've driven that option 3, and it happened to rain that day, so there was pond, water in the walkway. I want to know who's going to be responsible to make that easement and pay for it, because there is a lot of work. I mean, you go through with the truck, and you're halfway through a tree, because the tree is halfway in the way. So my concern was who's going to pay for, there's going to be a lot of work have to be done in this area to make it a legitimate, usable. It's really not right away.
Is Mr. Freeman live around here?
Well, if it's Jeff Freeman, he passed away.
I don't think I want to talk to him. Anybody else?
Well, Brian Freeman, as I understand it, is the trustee, personal representative for Jeff.
Where I was going, Neil, is it anybody other than you all, which a lot of times developers, I've been down the road before on that. Some of these people, and I've been around a lot of people that have been screwed over by easements. What they thought they got, what they thought they gave, and all that. I wonder, has anybody, like a board member, gone out and talked to this individual to see if there is a way you could reason with him. There's got to be a price
Well,
involved
let me say this.
before we do condemnation.
Yeah, I have spoken with Mr. Mann, who's in our office, who represents Lennar. They've had that conversation. Tom Gunderson, the attorney who messed up the legal descriptions, and he's had conversations. It's my understanding from talking with Charles, and talking with the folks at Harrison Franklin, what Mr. Caldwell just told you is true. They believe that Lennar owned the property and had the ability to give it to you. And I have a copy of the permanent easement here. And if you look at Exhibit N in Tony's package, there's a memo from Charles Mann, and it says, here's the temporary easement as the alternative to the permanent easement. But you have the permanent easement. You have opted not to record it and execute it, but you have it.
Well, again, a couple of things of clarification. Sorry, I can't stand it, Madam Chairman. Is that we don't have it. It's in escrow because we had that missing piece. So we don't have that easement, okay?
I'll give you a copy.
We have not accepted that easement. It's in escrow.
What's in escrow includes that portion.
Correct, but it's not a record, it's up because we have the question about the title.
Okay.
And secondly, what gets lost in this whole discussion is not just the transfer of the operational stage. WCI wants us to take title and fee simple to that property. And that becomes a question also. And so, I mean,
You're talking about the 100 acres, less the
Correct.
5.
Correct.
My thing is that if we know that we can get the Master Association at Reflection Isle, and we know that we can get the Renaissance, you basically have 90%, 95% of what you need to make this thing real. So again, the issue gets back to talking to this gentleman, or whoever has control over that property. It seems to me, before I want to do a condemnation, I've never in my life done a condemnation without first trying to talk to somebody. And I just don't see that our side of the fence has done the talking yet.
I don't know that you have. I can't speak to whether you have. I know Lennar has. I know WCI has. I don't know if you have.
Tony, has anybody or ST or anybody,
I think
has
Scott
anybody done
Connell's
it?
had conversations with Ron Zool. Does that sound familiar, David?
You
Who's-
remember
who's he?
your fire manager,
He's a
Mr.
broker.
Connell. He used to work with William James Holdings, and he's very familiar with Freeman and his broker representative, Ron Zool.
I wouldn't want to deal with the broker. I'd want to go directly to the property owner, because that's who we're going to go to when we file that condemnation.
Scott may be helpful if you have an ability to talk to him, he might make an inquiry for you.
Where I was going was, I've done, I don't know how many of these up north on projects.
Right.
And you've got to start it out as a friendly deal. You've got to start out. First thing is, this is not a fee simple taking. We're not buying the land. It's an easement. It's an easement.
Right.
Did somebody explain to this guy our powers and our rights to be able to do this? I think that if he understood that and knows that that's the trigger that we can pull, why do we want to go and spend all this money chasing it when we can, because the only one, sorry, Tony, but the only one's going to win on that's the attorneys. I'd much rather give him 10, 20, 30,000 bucks to avoid all that expensive condemnation to get the 50-foot that we thought we had in the first place, that somebody screwed up on the
Yeah, well,
recordation.
and this is not my opinion. I'm giving you opinion from the other folks from Henderson Franklin and, Lennar's attorney, is that they think it's even easier than that. They think it's, if there is a question about the title that Tony has, that it's a simple, quiet title, because they think, based on the explanation that David gave you, that it's clear what was intended, and, if that was ever litigated, they believe they would prevail, so.
Yeah, and on that point, if I may, that was one of the suggestions that Lennar or WCI engage in that quiet title action, ask that 50-foot strip, and then we have that easement.
Well, I would have absolutely no problem
Yeah.
of meeting with this gentleman and talking. I've done this a lot. And it may be that he is so distrustful of an easement because of a prior experience that he wouldn't do it if who came down
Yeah,
and
that
tried to get him to sign
I
it.
can't speak to, but strictly from WCI's standpoint, and I want to go back to, and I have a copy of the development agreement associated with your 1989 bond that David referenced. And in there, the district says, we are responsible for the maintenance, operation, and repair of the completed system. To get you to the answer to your question, WCI's done everything they're supposed to do except give you the final deed to the property. We're here today for you to accept that final deed, and what you're telling us is we're not going to accept it. But you're the permittee, you're liable, you're responsible. You have an easement already over Area 9 because, as David pointed out, that is your major outfall. You need that to make your system work. We're trying to help you do your job, but we're not responsible beyond what we've done. If you go back to the minutes in that package that Tony gave you from 1989, Mr. Moyer, who was the then district manager, had a discussion. And what WCI graciously agreed to do, David himself said, hey, we know there's some access issues. We know we don't screw you up in the bond. We'll be the good guys. We'll go in and we'll do the work outside of the bond issue, and we'll give it to you. So we have gone above and beyond, WCI has, and done everything they're supposed to do. You're supposed to accept the deed. If you choose not to, that doesn't seem wise. It doesn't seem consistent with all of your legal obligations. But you're responsible for operation and maintenance, not WCI. And if the district proceeds to enforcement, it's going to be against you and not against us, and we don't know what else to do to make you take the deed that you're supposed to take.
Tony, let me ask you a question, because I keep hearing about this 50-foot strip of land that's supposed to be owned by Lennar, and it's supposed to be included in this easement that's sitting in escrow. And apparently Charles Mann or someone with...
He represented Lennar at part of Reflection Isles.
believes that they can assume title to that through quiet title. Why hasn't that been done?
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, a quiet title
that
action.
seems like the simplest, easiest.
A quiet title action could have been filed in 2013. You saw the letter in the file.
Yeah.
When this issue was raised, and that's in the agenda packet. When the whole idea about this being a mistake was raised. And that could have been filed in 2013. It could have been in 2014.
Well, why don't we do that in 2017?
We don't have the deed to it. We don't have title to the property.
But I want to get back to
The
Mr.
part-
Tink-
excuse me, the
Mr.
prop-
Tinkle,
the-
to your
the
question. If you
person-
look at
excuse
your
me, if I
Exhibit
may-
F in
excuse me,
Tony's
I'm
package.
responding to the chairman's question.
Okay.
If I may, Madam Chairman.
Yes.
That the purported fee simple title holder, Worthington, Acacia, Lennar, Reflection Isles, for the 50-foot strip, would be the one to quiet title, because they are the asserted fee owner versus BJ Holdings.
They can't transfer it to us?
They could give us a deed, but then we'd have to file a quiet title action.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, if you look at Exhibit F, page 111, the then district engineer, Andy Tilton, acknowledged that it's the district job to maintain Area 9.
Can you bring that up, Justin?
And on page 112, the district manager, Gary Moyer, said, if you ever have a problem gaining access by your current method, which was happenstance, he didn't say that's my words, you can pursue condemnation. So you've known since 1989 that that was a possibility. And to go back to what Mr. Caldwell just explained to you and was confirmed by Mr. Mann in his letter in Exhibit N, is that the easement that they gave you is better than the easement that you've had all along. So
Who's Mr. McNeil? Is he the attorney?
At the
Mr.
time,
Mann's
yes.
the attorney
He was the attorney
for
at the time.
Lennar. Mr. Moyer was the district
No,
manager in
Mr. McNeil was the
1989.
attorney
For the
for the district.
CDD. Yeah, I think McNeil was the CDD attorney.
Correct.
Right.
What I'm trying to figure out is, and I don't know how many of these projects I've done, I have never, ever, ever seen anything done like this. This is almost like a bastard. Why would he, as the attorney for the CDD, and David, you're probably the only one who was around.
probably the one who can
it was
answer
a year
that.
before me getting here. Why would he, as the attorney for the CDD, give any indication to the board at that time, regardless of the fact it was ran by the developer? Why would we have taken any acquisition of that property without access to it? Because of what it's sounding like, that Lennar deal, that option 2, didn't come till after 1989.
But it didn't come till after
So
1989.
what was McNeil's idea? And David's the only one maybe that can answer this. What was his idea as to how this thing was going to be accessed in the future?
Well, David can answer
'Cause option
correctly.
two
My
wasn't there.
reading of the minutes is they just push, it's like we're using it when there's no problem, when we have a problem.
See, that's what I read. It was, well, it's ollie, ollie, all in free until we get caught.
Well,
And,
Mr.
hey,
Moyer
I don't
said,
like
hey,
doing-
if we ever get stopped, we'll
I
do
don't like doing
condemnation.
business
That's
that
what he
way.
said. So I'm assuming it's like, we'll just keep doing this till somebody says we can't. That's how I read it. But David, you
Neil
probably
still
have a more
around?
accurate representation than
I'm
that.
not sure.
No, he doesn't.
So, Tony, how, is there a way to request the pursuit of the quiet title?
Yeah, we can ask them. We can ask, the recommendation was have them pursue the quiet title. Once they get clear title to the property, then we can have the easement agreement recorded.
Who initiates that?
The purported owners of that 50-foot strip, that would be, at the present time, is that Reflection Isles Master Association, I believe?
Yeah, that's the other problem. Lennar owned the property at the time when they gave the permanent easement. They don't now. They've turned it over to the HOA.
Yeah, but I think Lennar still controls the Reflection Isle Masters Association.
That's not my understanding, so I won't speak to that.
In English, who takes the first step?
The property owner, the purported fee owner who owns it, which
So
is
it's
Reflection
either,
Isles.
so it's either Lennar or it's the Master Association of Reflection Isles.
And I don't know why the Master Association's going to do that for us.
That's what I was gonna say. What, have they been approached to ask them to do this?
No, Lennar hasn't done anything since they provided the permanent easement because they felt like they'd done all this is what I've been told. They've done everything they needed to do by providing it and that at Tony's direction, it wasn't executed and recorded.
You going back to option two, Neil?
Option 2, you have.
It's not recorded because there isn't clear title. Let's get, make that clear. So it's of no effect. It's not in effect. So let's just, absent there being the quiet title in the 50-foot strip, giving them the authority, the clear ability to grant the easement. And again, a quiet title action, you don't get into valuation. You don't get into that kind of issue. You get into, it could be a reformation of the deed saying the first deed was a mistake. You quiet,
Is the quiet title a goose chase?
my opinion, no.
It's an opportunity.
Yes.
So
It sounds to me
let's do
then
that.
that's where we should go first.
Well, it wouldn't be us. It would be Reflection
Well,
Isles.
we have to request it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting to.
So let's-
We make the
let's-
first move.
Let's request the pursuit of the quiet title.
Are we missing anything there by going that action?
No, they're the ones that would have to do it, but I mean, I guess the fundamental question about why we're here, I mean, I know access is an issue. Under the bond agreement, under the development agreement, under the complete history, the district's in charge of the drainage. Area 9 is your primary outfall for the drainage. We're supposed to be the owner. We have done all the paperwork for you to accept it. So the question is, are you or aren't you going to accept Area 9?
I don't think we should.
Well, and I think, but backing up to this issue about the quiet title, I think WCI could ask the association to convey that property to them. WCI could do the quiet title action and then provide the easement.
It's not our responsibility. We're not in charge of
Okay.
owning and maintaining the drainage.
The
district is.
The water management permit does not require us to take fee simple title. Show me in there where it says that, Neil.
You have an easement for the property. You're the permittee. You're responsible for operation and maintenance. We're done.
But the South Florida Water Management District permit does not require us to take fee simple title.
You're correct.
Okay, thank you.
So,
But you're still responsible.
so what happens if we don't take fee simple title?
We don't own the 100-plus acres. But there's an easement in our favor.
That's what I was gonna say. We have an easement.
You have an easement.
We have an easement.
But they still have,
So that's the same thing as half the lakes in Gateway that are still owned by HOAs, that they own the property, but the CDD has the
Correct.
operating permit, which is almost like, why?
So
My-
to move this forward though, because I think we need to decide what we're gonna do. And obviously, I don't think anybody on the board wants to move this, wants to take this property without clear easement. Let's pursue the fee simple title.
pursue
Whoever-
having WCI or Reflection Isles
Whoever.
attain title and do the quiet title.
Whoever is willing to do it, if Lennar is willing to do it, if Reflections Isle is willing to do it, whoever we need to contact to try and get that fee simple title done, let's do it. Let's go back to whoever didn't record it properly in the first place and ask them to get it recorded properly.
Now, when you say fee simple title, we're not talking about a taking, we're talking about an easement, are we?
We're talking about ownership of the
It's
50.
an easement, not a fee simple taking.
Well.
We're not gonna own the
but-
property.
But if I recall correctly, based upon the letter, and bear with me a second, and unless I misread it, the letter in 2013,
You looking at Exhibit N, is that what you're looking at?
yeah, is that the one?
David,
Neil?
while he's looking for that, do we have some other property owners that we have to go to, or entities that we have to go to, that this easement that we're requesting, especially on the north-south, well, both legs,
I'll update the title work to
that
make sure.
crosses other entities' easements?
Well, I'll update the title work to make sure, that's all. But we may not.
My belief is the easement in escrow is 100% of what you need.
That's not my question. I've been out there, and I've seen water lines and sewer lines that are going underneath, both on the east-west leg on the south and the north-south leg on the east. Pipes going under that. I'm taking, it's City of Fort Myers, and they have an easement.
Yeah.
If we have an easement that goes across like this, do we have to get their permission?
No, they just have an easement.
They just have an easement.
And
So
as
we
long
got
as we
two
don't-
easements on the same piece of property.
Correct.
Jesus. But,
What, let's see here.
So Tony, do you have direction from the board that we want to pursue this?
Yes, and just two complete.
there's still another bigger issue.
Here we go. Well, the letter, and this is where I understand that the 50 feet was supposed to be owned by Acacia at the time, because the letter from Han Lozier, October 11, 2013. Thank you, Neil. It's Exhibit K1. To my memo, it says Acacia was intended to be granted the easterly 50 feet of the tower site to access the conservation areas, which Acacia maintains, and Worthington was intended to be granted an easement over the easterly 50 feet of the tower site to access its property. So that's where it appears that the 50 feet was supposed to be owned by Acacia.
Which became Leonard, which became.
Right, which gets back to the ability then to do a quiet title action for the 50 feet.
Are you saying that that's an obstacle to doing that?
No, I think that's- no, that's the-
It allows it.
Correct.
Okay.
Let's try and get that accomplished.
Then the next step, just so that we know where we're heading on this, notwithstanding all the soft cost that's going to be done, legal fees, engineering fees, surveying fees, and all the other stuff to do this, you're going to have a construction cost to build that road, drainage and everything. Where's it coming from? Because 6,000 lineal feet, you're going to be looking every bit of $30 a foot minimum to build that road. $30 a
Worry
foot.
about that later, Ed.
I don't want to push that down the road, Bill. It's too much money.
We gotta push it down the road.
Where's, we can ask right now, where's it coming from?
Who are you gonna ask?
I'm asking, we're the ones that make the decision, or we gotta ask the question, where's it coming from? Is it our responsibility? This, I think it's a legal issue. Are we responsible as a district that we just incur the cost and go on down the road and swallow hard?
I don't wanna hear any more about that right now.
Well, Bill, it's reality.
I
This has
don't
got-
wanna hear any more about
Madam
it.
Chairman.
Ed, you've taken
Madam Chairman.
40 minutes of our
I'm talking
time
Bill.
now.
I'm talking Bill. This has been kicked down the road because of this very deal for 24 stinking years.
We don't even know
Let's-
where we're going.
Well, the issue is, we know where we're gonna be when we get there. It's gonna cost money to fix the road. And my deal is if we have, and Tony is telling us legally, that it is our expense, it's our expense, then let's start planning on how we're going to fund what I think is gonna be close to $200,000.
And Tony, is it our expense? I'll just plainly and simply ask you the question.
And that's a yes or a no.
Well, I understand, and I haven't analyzed this issue from that perspective, whether or not we can require them to provide practicable, easy access as opposed to legal access. You know, there's a difference between the two.
Is there anything in the past documents?
I'd have to go look, I don't,
Okay. Will you also pursue that?
Yes, I will research that,
and
yes.
let us know?
Yes.
Okay.
Can we take a break?
Yes, 5-minute break.
Are we done with this at this point?
Yes.